Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Joseph. It's been a long time since I did a Watch Me Edit series, so I am doing another one. I got really addicted to shooting in the studio, bringing you guys all of the great sets that I was building. I'm not really taking a break, but I just want to take my time to, go through retouching because I'm getting questions again about how I'll be editing some of my images. So I'm actually going to be doing some of the edits of the shoots I've done in the studio where I build the set. So stay tuned for all those videos coming up. All right, anyway, so starting off, I'm going to be using Bridge again to just sort my images, figure out the one I want to edit. I don't want to bore you guys with that, so I'm just going to open this particular image and then we're going to start off with the editing process. I'm going to start off by opening it in Photoshop, which is automatically going to open it in Camera Raw, and then we're going to make some adjustments right here. So the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is going to be the fact that my histogram says there's a lot of information in the shadow part of the image, right? And then right in the midtones, we don't really have a lot of details. And then in the highlights, we have some information going on, right? But if I look at my image on the left, I don't see what the information in the highlights is because it's almost gone to pure white. It's almost overexposed, except at the top here where we can see a tiny bit of the clouds. Majority of the information in the top is gone. But then when I look at my histogram, it says there is information there. So now how do I get that information back, right? Because if I look in the shadow area here, where sometimes you can just click here and then drag, you can see I'm affecting that particular area. So that lets me know that this part of the histogram is referring to where she is. And rather, if I come into the highlights now and drag that, you'd see that I'm beginning to see some information coming into the sky. It means that we have information there that we can recover. So I'm just gonna hit reset so I know that everything is going back to the way it was imported. By the way, this was shot with my 5D Mark IV and a 24-70 lens. All right, so moving on, I'm going to start off with bringing the information back here down. I'll do this in two steps. The first one is just going to be me using the basic tab directly. So I'm going to go into my highlights, maybe pull down my highlights a little bit, and you can see now we're beginning to see the clouds, right? If I go all the way down, you're beginning to see that there really is a lot of information in the image, right? But if I zoom in to her face, all right, forget the clouds for a moment, and when I bring it down, you can see that we are still affecting her in a way, right? But I don't want this effect to be there. Even though it's subtle, I still don't want to be affecting her as much. So I'm going to pull my highlights back to 0. And then now I'll just begin to bring it down a little bit. So maybe somewhere like here is good. Remember, we're making small adjustments, and then all those individual things you were doing is going to come together to enhance our image, right? I'm going to go to my shadows, open up the shadows a tiny bit. I'm going to go into whites, and then again just bring the whites down a tiny bit as well, and then even bring my exposure down some more, and now I can open up the shadows even more. So this is all that I will do in the basic tab. The next thing I'm going to do is just going to go into my graduated filter. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to drag my graduated filter down somewhere like so I know it's just affecting more of the sky than my subject, right? So in here I can now go full on and then drag the exposure down, drag the highlights down, even bring the shadows down a little bit, still go down on the highlights. All right, so I'm going to bring the adjustment down like so, and then now I can just go on and adjust the sliders a little bit. I'm going to increase the contrast and maybe add a little bit of coldness into the sky. All right, I'm going to go back into my basic tab, and when I do it before and after, you can see that we've been able to bring information back into the image. Now it's making the whole thing look a little bit flat, so I'm just going to go back into my exposure and then just increase that, increase the contrast, add some dehaze, add a little bit of clarity, go back and increase my contrast, increase the blacks as well, before and after. Now you can see we're beginning to make the image look a little bit more dramatic, right? Now I'm gonna just come down and then go into optics, and I'm gonna click on enable profile corrections, but I'm going to open that and then make a few more adjustments. What I want to do, for example, is to bring the vignette back so that I can draw attention to the middle part of the frame, and I think that's all I'll do right here. I'm going to go into the profiles, and I'm going to come down into camera matching, and then there are so many options here. So there's faithful. As you can see, it adds a lot of contrast and even saturation to the image, and I think I like the tones. That is why when I'm shooting with my camera, I'm always almost setting my picture profile to either faithful or to neutral. And you can see the neutral really doesn't do so much, but I don't like the colors of the neutral here because adding a lot of green. I like faithful because it's keeping the skin tones looking rich and saturated. If you look at landscape next, you can see what it's doing. It's over saturating. I don't think I want that. If I go to portrait as well, it's just over saturating the image. If I come to standard, now this is also looking over saturated. If I go to monochrome, that obviously is just one color. So I'm just going to click on faithful because that's what I like. So we're going to go back, and now I'm going to go into camera calibration, and here I'm going to play with the red, green, and blue primaries. All right, so I'm going to zoom into the image a little bit because now this area is more for her skin. Okay, so I'm going to go into the red primary, and I'm just going to move the sliders around just a little bit. So if I move to the left, you can see it's making her skin look very, very magenta, and that's not what I want. Just move it to the right, maybe +1, and maybe just decrease the saturation of the reds just a tiny bit, so maybe -8. I'm going to go into the greens, and I don't want the greens to be really visible in the image, so I'm going to desaturate that as well, and just move the slider to the right, to the left. I think I like it a little bit more towards the right, so maybe +2. And now in the blue primary, I'm also going to do the same thing, so move it to the left. To the right is looking a little bit dull. To the left, it's looking a little bit punchy, so maybe -2. And now the saturation, when I saturate it, is looking a little bit more vibrant. I like that. When I move it to the left, it's looking a little bit dull, so I'll move it to the right a tiny bit. All right, I'm going to close this layer, go back into my basic tab, and zoom out a tiny bit like that so I can see the entire image. And I'm just going to add a little bit to the highlights. I'm going to increase my exposure just a little bit, add some more contrast, and I think this is all I'll be doing inside of Adobe Camera Raw. So when I press P, this is the before, this is the after, before, after. You can see we've added a lot of drama to the image. So what I'm going to do now is just click on open, and this is going to open the image inside Photoshop, where I can do a lot of my editing in. So first things first, I just want to have like a general idea of how the image is going to look like before I start editing, so I know where I want to focus my attention on. And because I'm going to post this image on Instagram, Instagram's crop is 4:5. Clicking on that shows me that I'm going to be losing a lot of the top. So when I drag it down, I feel like I'm really losing out on the sky because that's where all of the drama is, and I want to keep that. So I'm going to drag the box up a little bit. You can see the edges look empty, but I have content aware checked. So when I click on the check mark, let's just hope Photoshop is able to do its calculations and then give me like nice looking edges to fill up the frame. Wow, it did a really nice job. I really love it. It looks organic, especially on the left hand side, but on the right, this is where we have a little bit of an issue, but even with that, it doesn't look too repeatable, so I think it can pass. I think right here, this is where it looks repeatable. So what I'll just do is, instead of keeping the crop full like this, I'll just come down a little bit, somewhere like so, and then press OK. Yeah, so now I can zoom in and remove some of the repeated patterns, right? So I'm just going to press S for clone stamp tool because I need to be cloning in from different areas to, just add more variations into this area. So somewhere like this, I'm going to sample and then just paint in. And I don't care if it doesn't match because I can just adjust my opacity. And again, I don't want to repeat what is here because then again, I am reintroducing repetition, and that is where people will get to see that you've done like a really bad Photoshop job. Okay, so now this looks believable. I can just reduce my opacity a tiny bit, and I'm going to go up here and then do the same thing so I can get rid of the repetition here. So I'm going to sample somewhere around here like that, and I'm just going to paint over that. All right, so you can see I'm sampling from different areas and just adding more texture. Luckily this rock has like a lot of texture, so when you sample from different areas and blend in, it's not going to look too off. I think I like where we are at. So now I just need to go on and enhance the image a little bit more. All right, so let me just quickly draw out the things I want to do next so you guys can follow along. So I'm going to create a new blank layer. I'll delete this layer later. This is just to draw out the things I want to do so you guys can follow along easily, right? So zooming into the image, I'd want to reduce these dark areas. And then I was thinking of removing these. Maybe I'll just get rid of some of them, not all of them, because I mean, obviously she's by the water. So there is going to be some spill on her swimsuit. That is absolutely fine. And with the way she's standing, you can see she pushed her hip onto this side, and so we're having a little bit of a change in the shape right here. So I think I'll just want to smoothing that a little bit just so we can match this area right here. Okay, so zooming down as well, I will just remove some of these blemishes. She doesn't really have a lot of blemishes, and that's really good. And so we're going to be just doing these basic cleanups, and yeah, I think we'll be done. Maybe just add a little bit of a color grade, and then that would be it. All right, so I'm going to delete this help or this guide layer that I created, and now I'm just going to merge this to the layer below. So Command E. Now I've merged it. We have a new canvas to start with. Now the first thing I want to do is, because I know I want to change the shape, normally I save my liquefies for the last stage, but with this I just want to do it now and then get rid of it. So I'm going to go into filter, come down to liquify, and then I'm going to zoom in. Now I'm going to use the warp tool, the forward warp tool, and I'm just going to increase the size a little bit and then just push it. I realized it was too strong, so I'm going to reduce the pressure, and I'm also going to reduce the size a tiny bit, but more on the pressure. All right, so I'm going to increase my size again, and now I can make the adjustments in tiny bits, okay, so that I make sure it looks as organic as possible. Remember, when you're making adjustments in Photoshop or whatever retouching software that you're using, your adjustments have to be really minimal. This is the only way you can get your images to look really natural, so people can't tell exactly what you've done to your image. All right, so I'm gonna just tweak this a little bit, and once I'm here, I'll just zoom in a little bit to the swimsuit and then push these in as well. My aim is not to do everything inside of the Liquify software. I can do the rest inside Photoshop itself. So if it looks rough, I don't really mind. I can continue inside Photoshop. So here's a before and after. You can see it looks real, it looks natural. We can now move on with the rest of our retouch. All right, press OK. Okay, for some reason, I'm thinking that she looks a little bit short in the frame, so I want to extend the length a little bit. So maybe I have to sacrifice on the clouds I want to keep in the beginning, and then maybe just get rid of just a little bit more of the sky. So I'm going to drag the image up a tiny bit, and now I'm going to press M, just draw around to like her waist area. hit Command J so that we have just that area on its own layer. Just in case the adjustments I'm about to make doesn't go well, I can just delete that layer and start over again. So I'm going to hit Command T on the new layer I created. I'm going to right click and click Distort, and I'm just going to drag this down just like that. So if I do it before and after, you can see that we've elongated her legs a little bit more. She's already a tall model, but because of the compression and how far away I was from her, it made her look a little bit more compressed. So adding this length just increases her a little bit, gives her the proportions that she naturally has, and this is looking good already. All right, this is a permanent change I want to make, so I'm just gonna hit Command E just to merge it back down. Okay, so moving on, I'm gonna zoom in now, and then because this image is not really a close-up, I don't really need to focus on so many of the blemishes, even though she doesn't really have a lot of them. I can just get rid of these tiny ones. So I'm still using my healing brush tool, and then I'm just getting rid of little distractions. I'm not really doing a lot because you won't really see this when the image is zoomed out. It's just because I zoomed in, my OCD is kicking in and it's making me just clean up the image even more. But I mean, it excites me, so this is just fun to do for me. So if I'm doing it, it's not like I'm stressing or anything. This is what I'm really passionate about.
Just let yourself go. Say it loud, wake the world on the other side, make it real. Just let yourself go. Just let go. Ooh.
Okay, I think this pretty much does all of the healing. Just get rid of this last bit. All right, so that's it for me. I'm just gonna come down again, and now we can move on to frequency separation. So I'm gonna run my frequency separation action. Just get a good radius. Press OK. Make a duplicate of the low layer so that I can delete this layer if I make any mistake. Now that I have my mixer brush selected, I'm just gonna zoom in and then start playing with smoothing out the skin a little bit. So I'm gonna zoom in, make the brush a little bigger, and then just start painting to even out the skin tones. Remember, this is not like a very close-up shot. You don't really need to be pixel peeping at this point because the image is not going to be this close anyway. This is a very wide shot, so you can get away with certain things. So let's talk about retouching. Retouching, you just need to know some of the things that you can get away with so that you can cheat a little bit. I mean save time. I don't mean cheat. I mean save time. Because nowadays we don't have a lot of time on our hands, right? Okay. So I'm just evening out transitions. I'm not even being very precise with my brush strokes like I would if I was doing a beauty retouch. Again, this image is a very wide image, so you can get away with certain things. I'm also not aiming to do everything inside of this retouching layer. I just want to get it, quite close to what I want it to be, and then I'll use the dodge and bend to do the rest of the cleanup.
Yeah, you and I both longing for expression for the things we like, but we stay quiet. Hold me now, tell me things, tell me all about how you feel.
All right, you can see with the frequency separation, we've been able to smooth out some of the transitions, but this is not really the final stage. I still need to go in and make a few more adjustments, right? But with my high layer selected, I just want to get rid of some of the textures here. I want to just reduce it a little bit. So I'm going to sample a good area and then just get rid of these textures and just reducing them a little bit. And now I'm gonna go into the empty layer and select a normal brush, set the color, the blend mode to color, and then just sample and then paint. This is also going to help even out the color tone here. So this is a quick way of evening out color tones. If you don't have a lot of time, you can just use this quick trick, but you have to be a little bit precise. All right, so I'm gonna paint it out of the dress. Now I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. And then I'll just reduce the opacity till it looks a little bit more believable. We still have kept the depth there, but now the skin tone just matches a lot better, right? Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing to the leg on this side. So to the thigh here, it looks a bit desaturated. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of color. I can also use curves to do the same thing. So actually, let me just use curves so you guys get to learn that approach as well. So let me just quickly erase this. Okay, so if I want to use curves to, just like unify the color tone here, I'm just gonna go into adjustments, go to curves. I know I need to add red and yellow to make it look orange or brown, right? So I'm just gonna go into red, increase the red, go into the blues, reduce the blues, and you can see it's already warmed up. It's made it look a little bit more brown. So Command I to invert. And all I've done is just inverted the layer right here. So if I hit Command I, you can see it goes to white. When I hit Command I, it goes to black. So when it's black, you don't see the adjustments, but it's still there. And now I can use my brush with a white foreground, and then I can now paint just that area over the thigh. And you can see we're adding that golden brown tone to the thigh, and it's matching the rest of the leg. But it's a little bit too strong, so I'm just gonna go into the opacity and reduce it till it looks just about right. So something like this looks good before and after. You can see we've been able to add color. So I think I'll just do the same thing to the arm up here. Just gonna press B and paint over it. So now I'm just bringing back saturation to areas that look a little bit desaturated. That is all I'm doing. Yeah, this looks good. I think I can even go over the face a little bit, but because I don't want it to be too strong, I'm just going to reduce my opacity to about 50% and then just paint over the face and just warm up the face once and for all. So when I zoom out, now we have an image with very good skin tone from beginning to end. And I'm able to cheat this way because, again, this image is not a very close-up shot in your face shot. So I can do some of these things just to, do them really quickly and then get rid of them. All right, so now that we're done with frequency separation, you notice I did all these adjustments inside the frequency separation. You can take it out if you want, but I'll keep it in there because these are permanent changes. I'm not going to come back to them to change later on, right? Maybe what I can do is just go back into the curves and then paint with black out of the eyes so that I don't make the eyes look golden as well. So just paint that out. Okay, so I think we can move on from here. So I'm going to run my dodge and bend action. Press play. And now we have, this image looks so good in black and white. Anyways, but I don't want it to be a black and white image. So I'm going to go into my dodge and bend, create curves. All right, and then I'm just going to add some contrast in here so I can see the variations in the tones a lot better. And now I can just go with a normal brush into my dodge and bend layers and now start evening out the differences in the skin tone. Okay, so opacity 100%. Now this time I'm going to make my flow about 2%, and I'm going to keep the brush on the white, and now I can start revealing the dodge on the areas that need to be dodged or need to be brightened. All right, so I'm going to go over the areas that are already bright. I'm going to go over them, and then whilst I'm there, when I see anything that is not transitioning properly, I'll just be painting over it till it looks good. I know you may not be able to see anything at the moment because of YouTube's compression, and also because the adjustments are very faint, but when I do it before and after, you can see that I'm actually reducing some tonal inconsistencies, right, in the image, and it's beginning to make the image look a little bit more 3D-ish. I'm also not going in depth and doing like a micro dodge and bend. This is a bit global because, again, I don't need to go into the micro level because this is a very wide shot and people are not really going to be pixel peeping as much. Even if they do, it's going to pixelate. So, I mean, why spend so much time doing all of that? Okay, so I'm darkening this area so that it blends in properly. You can see we've reduced the lightness there, made it darker, so it's blending in properly. I'm gonna go back to dodge and now just dodge some areas just so the transitions are a lot smoother. Nothing too fancy here. I'm gonna move on to the face, maybe zoom in a little bit more and do the same thing. So if there's any area that needs to be lightened, I'm going to be dodging it to lighten it and to make the transition a lot smoother. So again, in case you're not seeing anything on the face, here's a before, after. You can see I am reducing the inconsistent transitions, and those things are making the image look a lot smoother, right? Okay. Most of the time people think like there's a shortcut doing these things, but honestly you have to put in the work. If people think when you retouch and your image doesn't look retouched, it means you barely did anything. But to be honest, that is the toughest part of retouching, to be able to retouch your images so it's not so obvious that you've retouched. It is the hardest thing, and it even takes the longest time to do, you know. Especially, you know, some people just focus on dodge and bend to retouch, but I don't have the time to do that. And you can see from my images that they still look, to me, they still look like really natural. They don't really look over polished, even though I'm using frequency separation that a lot of people shy away from, or a lot of people call unprofessional. And so a lot of people say that once you master dodge and bend, then you're a pro retoucher. But I believe that dodge and bend, frequency separation, they are all tools. They are all available tools for you to use to enhance your images. You can go overboard with dodge and bend. It just takes a longer time to go overboard. And you can go overboard with frequency separation. It just takes a shorter time to go overboard. So once you have that self-control, once you're able to control how strong you want your effects to be with frequency separation, and once you're also blending it with dodge and bend, I believe you get the best of both worlds, and your images begin to look a certain type of way that not everyone can easily mimic, you know, because you're using or you're combining two methods to give you like a very, very good and unique results. All right. So here's a before and after. Just the face, you can see, is looking a lot smoother. So if you really want to do like very well with dodge and bend, frequency separation, you need to invest in a Wacom tablet. And this is like a drawing tablet that you can connect to your PC. So like your laptop or your desktop, like whatever machine you have, you need a Wacom tablet to connect to it. And it's going to give you that pencil and paper feel. So it's like you're sketching or you're drawing. This gives you the best control when it comes to retouching, because you're more precise. You have like full control over the strokes, you know, because it's like you're drawing, you're painting. And basically that is what you're doing with dodge and bend or frequency separation. You are painting pixels around, okay? So I'm just gonna dodge here a little bit, zoom out, and keep on dodging, just trying to make the things look as even as possible. But then again, I also don't aim to like really polish my images, because when I do that, then it begins to look fake or plasticky. Because to be honest, even though our eye doesn't sometimes see all these tonal variations in person, it still smoothings out. Like our eyes are able to smoothing out the tonal transitions, and so when we're looking at people, we don't really see like all of those variations, but the camera picks it up. So sometimes when you're just retouching, you don't really need to be 100% perfect. You just need to get it to a level that looks natural, believable, you know, to a point where your eye cannot really distinguish the difference in the tonal ratios in the image, right? That's the only way you can get like a very well balanced and pleasing looking image, right? So don't think retouching means that you have to go overboard 100% of the time. You don't. All right. Okay. So now I'm blending this area just so it blends in with the rest of the image. Doing the same thing here. Okay. Now I'm going to do some dodging. So go back to the dodge layer.
Just let go. Just let go.
Alright, I'm quickly just going to hide this dodge and burn. And I mean the contrast and the black and white, because I want to see it in color, and then I'll just go over these areas a little bit. I don't want to go overboard, so I'm just going to quickly paint over these areas, to smoothing them out, but not as much. And as soon as I'm done with like dodge and burn, I think I'm done with the image. This is the most time consuming part of retouching, the dodge and burn process. It is time consuming. So imagine you have like 15, 20, 30 images to edit, and then you only want to use dodge and burn to do that. Probably gonna spend like weeks on the image, and imagine you have like a lot of images to do for different clients. It's really not sustainable. Well, that is why they have like professional retouchers out there, because they have like retouching houses where they have like a system, and so when you send your images to them, they will be able to retouch and give you like that same feel, even though it's being done by different people. But I mean, we can do these ourselves sometimes. And especially if you're using frequency separation as a balance, as an add-on, then you don't really need to outsource some of these things. All right, so now I'm done with my first level of dodge and burn. You can see we've added some structure to hair, right? I'm just going to create another dodge and burn action, and for this one I'm just going to make hair pop with it. All right, I don't need the black and white for this. I'm gonna hide it. I'm gonna go into my dodge, and with this I'm also going to increase my flow, because I want the adjustments to be very visible, because when I'm done I'm going to use the opacity to tone everything down. So I'm gonna make my brush bigger, and now I'm just gonna go over like the areas that are already highlighted or have light on there. So you can see I'm just going over with little strokes, just like that. I'm not doing anything too fancy, just going over the areas that already have like light on there and just enhancing that. All right, so just like that. Go over the forehead, over the nose, chin, a little bit over the cheeks, over the lips. So if I do it before and after, you can see it's like we're adding like a strong highlight on hair, right? I'm going to go into the opposite sides where there are shadows, and I'm also going to add like shadows to wherever the shadows are supposed to be. So wherever there's darkness, I'm just going to go over and then darken those areas down. All right, so just like that. I know it looks weird right now, but bear with me. So right now when I do it before and after, you can see she's popping off, but it's very, very strong. So what we're going to do now is just close the group and then reduce the opacity till everything just blends in nicely. So about 55, it's looking good. So before and after, you can see we've added some form to her, but I don't like what I did on the swimsuit, this area. So I'm just going to go into the band, not the entire group. I'm just going to go into the band and paint with black. So flow 100% paint with black, and then get rid of the burning that I did here. Go into the dodge and then do the same thing. Just get rid of it from here. All right. I don't think it was necessary for me to put it on the suit. So before, after, we've added a lot of pop to hair. So now for my final steps, what I'm going to do is just color grade the image, add more contrast, make hair pop even more, darken the rocks, make hair a little bit brighter, and then we add some color grade, and then we're done. So I'm going to go into curves, and let me just drag my curves out. So I'm going to drag it here, just so I don't have to be going back and forth, right? And then I have my adjustments here. All right. So now I'm going to just, increase the highlights a little bit. And I'm going to darken this down. So add a little pop like that. All right, so this is like a global adjustment I've made. I'm going to create another curves, and I'm also going to darken this down again. But this time I don't want it to affect my subject. So on the mask, I'm going to hit Command I, press B for brush tool, make the brush a little bigger, make sure it's also soft. And now with white, I'm just going to paint on the layer mask and make sure that I'm putting the darkening in the corners of the frame. So just start at the top. Okay. Just a tiny bit of shading just around the rocks. So if I do a before and after, you can see we've added like some darkening to the edges of the frame. I'm going to go into curves, and now I'm going to brighten the image a little bit. You can see it's affecting every part of the image, right? So I'm going to hit Command I on the layer mask, go to B for the brush tool, and then just paint over where my subject is. So now we're adding light to her. So if I do it before and after, you can see she's looking very bright, but this is way too much. So I'm going to tone it down with the opacity, so somewhere around 40%. And now when I group these and then do it before and after, you can see that we've added a little bit of pop onto my subject. Now she stands out, she's the focus, and then we've just desaturated the lights around here a little bit. We've toned down the lights around here, so now all the focus goes straight onto my subject. Now what I want to do to fine tune everything is just add a little bit of color grade. So I'll go into color balance and start off there. Now in my midtones, I'm just going to be moving the slider around and see if I want to go into like a warm tone or if I want to go into like a cooler tone. And I think I want to actually go into like a cooler tone because of the way it's affecting her skin. Add a little bit of blue as well. And maybe just add a little bit of magenta. So I think this point for the midtones is looking really good. I like the way it's looking. Then I'm going to go into the shadows and then maybe just still cool it down a little bit. This time I want a little bit more green in the shadows, and I'm going to add just a little bit of red as well. Now I'm going to go into the highlights and just going to add some yellows, add a little bit of green, and then I'm also going to add just a little bit of cyan. I don't want it to look too warm in the beginning. I'm going to go into selective color and still enhance the whites later. But for now, this is the tone that I'm looking for. So I think what I've done to the shadows and midtones and highlights is really working well. I like the mood that I've gone, for this particular image. I'm going to go into selective color and I'm going to go into the whites. I'm going to start off with the whites and let's see what we can do with the whites. I think adding more cyan into the whites is working well. I don't think I want to touch magenta at all, but actually adding a little bit of magenta seems to be working. And now with the yellows, yeah, for a cleaner look, I think I'm going to take yellows out of the highlights. And now I'm going to go into the neutrals and see what we can do here as well. So here you can see it's affecting like a large area. I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to actually just add a little bit more cyan still. Now in the magenta side, I think I will add a little bit of magenta, go into the yellows, and actually just take out a little bit of the yellow. And then with the blacks, I'm still just going to just darken it a little bit, so maybe +2. So here's a little before and after so far using the selective color. I'm going to go into the blacks and then we can see like the final direction to add in terms of the color grade. So I think I want to add a little bit of cyan, and here I'll add just a tiny bit of magenta, and I'll add some yellows back here. And I'll go back into the neutrals and maybe just bring a little bit more of the yellows back. And then just add a little bit more magenta. So here's a before and here's an after. So if I zoom in, you can see that we have like a really nice, sharp, crisp and colorful looking image. At this point, I've spent almost an hour retouching this image, but again, you can see we just made subtle adjustments. So if I start off from the beginning, going through all the layers, this is where our image started from. I did a bit of cleanup, right? Then I went into frequency separation and added some, uniformity to the skin tone. Then I did dodge and bend. I did another level of dodge and bend just to make it pop. Then I increased the contrast, the shaded the corners, added more depth to the surrounding. Then I also relit the scene, so I focused more light on her and took away light from the edges so our attention goes straight onto our subject. Then we use color balance to add the first level of color grade that we wanted. I went on to the next level and then also just use selective color to fine tune the image. So I think this is looking really good. I really love the way the image is looking. I love the fact that we have the lights just right here. It looks like we use a strobe even on this day because of the punch that we're getting through dodge and bend. I really love the way it's looking. And yeah, I think this is it. If I want to add anything else, I think it's just going to be adding a little bit of noise. So I'm going to run my noise action, and even with this, I may just tone it down a little bit. You can see this is without the noise, this is with the noise. It just gives it an organic feel. So from 100, I'm just going to move it down to about 50%. And I think this will do it for today's Watch Me Edit series. I know I have taken my time and I've gone through like a lot of steps. So if you found this video helpful, if you found it useful, let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see more Watch Me Edit series like these, let me know in the comments down below. This channel is dedicated to me sharing the little knowledge I have in photography and Photoshop. So if you're new here, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate you. I'll catch you guys in the next video, and remember, don't ever give up.
We do, it's all so blue. Yeah, what if we could grow just like the flowers through the concrete? Just you